Before I begin creating my layout with this template in Photoshop Elements, I wanted to go over a couple of reasons why I like using Photoshop Elements to create my scrapbook pages versus regular Photoshop. One of the first things that I really appreciate about Photoshop Elements is the fact that when I select an item out of the toolbox over here, my tool options are at the bottom. And I really like that versus it having to go to Windows and pulling up a new workspace over here or tool selection that shows up over here. The next thing, and my favorite thing about Photoshop Elements over Photoshop for scrapbooking, is the photo bin. Right now, all we see is the template down here. However, when I bring in pictures, like I'm going to do now, for the kit, you will see what a benefit this is. Notice how my items are down here. They're still tabbed at the top, like in Photoshop, but instead of having to rearrange my workspace, I can see the item, so I can easily drag it up and onto my template. So that is one of the absolute, hands down, best reasons for using Photoshop Elements over Photoshop, in my opinion. Number two is when let me go back to my Move tool. When I select an item and I do anything to it, instead of having to go to the top to accept my changes, I can do it right at the element, so that I'm not having to constantly travel around, and I can minimize my mouse movements, and it just really speeds things up. So that's another reason that I really enjoy Photoshop Elements over Photoshop. Just some of the convenience tools, really. And then thirdly, if I make a change in Photoshop to the size of an element and or a picture, in order to keep everything in proportion to the original picture, I have to hold the Shift key down as I adjust it in and out. In Photoshop Elements, I can just drag the corner and it keeps everything in proportion to each other. So I don't lose anything there. So that becomes another big benefit because it's just less that I have to do, and it means I can scrapbook faster. So anyway, those are probably my top 3 reasons for liking Photoshop Photoshop Elements over Photoshop. I think that Photoshop definitely has its benefits. It's got much greater editing capacities for editing photos, and I can certainly understand why designers use Photoshop. But as just a scrapbooker, I think Photoshop Elements is a much easier program to utilize.